Hello and good afternoon to you, and welcome to our regular Thursday Target Jobs webinar. This week we're talking about applying for VAC schemes and training contracts, with the sort of traditional training contract deadline usually approaching around the end of July. There's obviously a lot of changes coming to the law sector this year, so we're just going to talk you through some of the things that have possibly changed through COVID and what the future is going to look like. I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves in a second. As always, we have to do a little bit of housekeeping. And the first thing is, if you want to ask a question, please feel free to do so at any time. You should have a little question feed on the right-hand side. And what I'm going to ask you to do is please upvote the questions that you most want answered. So don't just keep re-entering and re-entering. Upvote the one that you want to see answered the most, and we will address them in order of popularity once we get to the end. I'm going to leave, sorry, my name, I should have introduced who I am as well. My name is Matt. I'm actually the editor for Target Jobs Law, so hopefully that should be helpful for this particular webinar. And then I'm going to ask our panel to introduce themselves. And I know this will be different on everybody's screen, but I'm just going to go clockwise from the way I can see it. So perhaps if we could start with Thomas, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your job and the firm that you work for.
Great, thank you for that, Matt. So I'm Thomas. I'm the Early Careers Digital Advisor at Clyde & Co. So I work within the early Careers team, recruiting students who are graduates and also for other early careers opportunities such as apprenticeships. So for those who don't know, Clyde & Co. are a global sector-focused law firm specialising in commercial law. And yeah, just here to answer any questions that people have about applications for vacation schemes or training contracts.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And Amy, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your firm.
Yes, sure. Hi, I'm Amy. I'm one of the graduate recruitment advisors at Norton Rose Fulbright. In terms of my job, I guess it's the end-to-end process of going out on campus, albeit virtually this year, and marketing to students all the way through to running assessment centres, and then kind of that final best part of the job when you're able to offer someone a vacation scheme or training contract. Norton Rose Fulbright is a global international law firm offering seats in all different sectors, including banking, finance and disputes.
Thank you very much. And Johanna? Oh, sorry, Johanna, you're on mute.
Oh, you'd think after nearly 14 months. Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Johanna and I work in the graduate recruitment and development team at Weil. So my role is kind of recruiting all of our future trainees, so going out on campus and meeting and answering students' questions about our recruitment process and answering questions about Weil. And also I look after all of our trainees once they start their training contract as well, so supporting them throughout their 2-year training contract. So yeah, looking forward to answering your questions today.
Thank you very much. And Mark will be joined by a colleague as well who's just having some internet troubles. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about the firm and your role.
Sure, thanks, Matt. So I'm Mark. I work in the trainee recruitment team at Sludge in May. Like the others before me, I guess a large part of my role is looking after the end-to-end recruitment process for trainees, and also running and organising our various workshops and work experience schemes. So Sludge in May is a Magic Circle firm. We're multi-specialist, and yeah, I'm very happy to answer any questions you have at the end about the application process here and the firm itself.
Thank you very much, Mark. So I think we're going to start just by talking a little bit about VAC schemes. We were just discussing this beforehand as to whether things are going to change in future. So maybe if each of you could just tell us, I mean, how have VAC schemes worked? Everybody should have secured a VAC scheme by now, we were saying. But how have VAC schemes worked over the last year, and how are they going to work over the coming year? Again, if we start with Thomas, if that's all right.
Great, thanks. So in terms of vacation schemes, from Clyde & Co.'s perspective, we're running our vacation schemes virtually this year. So our students will be taking part in a 2-week-long placement. And the aim is to try and make it as realistic as possible for students that students would have taken place in in-person vacation schemes. So it still has the same amount of contact time with associates and fee earners and partners in the business. It's still the same amount of blended learning as well in terms of soft skills, application workshops, presentation skills, that type of thing. our aim when we were doing the virtual vacation schemes is just to make sure students do still get the same experience as they would do in person. Again, going forward, the market has changed a little bit over the last 18 months, as I'm sure everyone here will probably agree with. Barriers that people face accessing vacation schemes or training contracts are kind of being broken down. So I think going forward, there'll definitely be a bit more of a blended approach into work experience programs, whether that is in the same way as a vacation scheme or alternative programs will be offered to students.
Thanks, Thomas. When you say barriers are being broken down, do you mean because it's easier to access if it's done remotely?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think that definitely a location and the actual place the vacation scheme takes place is something that is considered, but also, from a perspective where students who might not always be able to actually physically be present in London for whatever circumstances they have, they might not be, just because of the location. It's far for them to travel. There could be, social factors involved or socioeconomic factors. People might not necessarily be able to afford accommodation or travel to London for their vacation schemes. So it just allows the schemes and programs to be a bit more inclusive going forward.
Thank you. And for those of you out there who are watching this, we have just recently done a webinar on sort of virtual onboarding and how to represent yourself in a virtual office. So please go to the employability webinars page. You can find that there and have a look through it. Amy, perhaps if you could tell us a little bit about VAC schemes at Norton Rose, both past and present.
Yeah, sure. So we also are running all of our vacation schemes virtually, and they're all a week long. I think the last year has actually given us a bit of an opportunity to kind of take a step back and look at what our vacation schemes were running like, and actually given us a bit of time to break them down and decide, okay, what sessions are necessary, what's actually the sessions that are really helpful. So we've kind of reconfigured our whole vacation schemes. We've added in lot out of it just because we didn't feel like that well enough. So instead of having students sitting in certain departments, they've been assigned a mentor and a buddy from the departments that they said they were interested in learning more about. And I think we've seen some real positives from doing the vacation schemes virtually in terms of things like just getting volunteers to help with sessions. It's so much easier when someone can just click on a link and they're there. You're not chasing people around the floors trying to get everyone in different meeting rooms. And I feel like we've kind of refreshed our timetable and seen some really good, innovative new sessions that we've added, which I think we'd want to keep. So I think moving forward, I think we'll take a hybrid approach of, half virtual, half in the office, so people can experience that culture, because I don't think you can replicate that online as well. So getting people in the office is going to be really important for us. But I think we'll definitely do a hybrid, a virtual and an in-office experience.
Thank you very much, Amy. And we've actually had this in past webinars where people express a certain amount of doubt about doing something virtually, but actually, like as you're saying, it can be really useful. There is different things you can do. You adapt to it, and you can still manage to put people connecting in ways that they might not connect if they were even face to face. So thank you for highlighting that. Johanna, please tell us a little bit about Weil.
Yeah, so we have run our vacation schemes virtually this year and last year, and this year our virtual vacation scheme has been 2 weeks and pretty much replicates what our in-person schemes were. So far as possible. I think what we've really wanted our VAC schemes to do is get some hands-on work experience of real trainee work, because that's something that we pride our VAC schemes on quite a lot. Getting to work on real live deals and having a go at real trainee tasks. So I think the VAC schemers that have joined us this year and last year have had a good opportunity to gain an insight into Weil. I think going forward, we will still be in-person vacation schemes. I think there are some benefits to running some virtual sessions ahead of our vacation schemes to make sure people are as prepared as possible. But we feel it's nice to meet our VAC schemers and get them into the office and get them kind of involved in real meetings and things like that. So I think that will be our kind of process going forward. But with some kind of virtual sessions, like I said beforehand.
Thanks. That's really good news. So those who prefer to do it in person, if you really desperately need to be in the office, get that chance. But it's all very modern. The idea that the world is changing. I quite like hearing it. It's going to be a mix of virtual and it's going to be a mix of in person. As that's always really nice to hear. Thank you. So Mark and Ellie, perhaps if you could tell us a little bit about VAC schemes at Slaughter and May, and I'm going to stay with you after that to talk a little bit about the SQE.
Hi, sorry I'm a bit late. I know you guys are doing introductions, so I'll quickly introduce myself. I am Ellen, and I am the Training Recruitment Executive at Slaughter and May. So I look after all of our trainees within the team. In terms of our virtual work experience slash like VAC schemes, we ran a virtual Easter scheme back in April, and this summer we are running 3 virtual schemes, 2 of which are in June, July, August for law students, and then we'll have one in September for non-law students. And so we're using Forage, and we're kind of trying to make it as interactive as possible, essentially. So we're doing some presentations, but quite a lot of just activities and like networking sessions. And that's what we did last year. We got good feedback. Feedback that we got that was constructive, we've improved upon, so hopefully this Sunday should
Thank you, Ellie. There might just be a little bit of distortion on the line for those of you watching. Hopefully, if we all keep our mics muted and whatnot when someone else is speaking, that should help alleviate it a little bit. I want to stay actually with Ellie and Mark just to ask a little bit about, because it's 2021. This is the year that the promised SQE was going to be introduced. For anybody who saw our last webinar on virtual onboarding, we were joined by Adelshaw Goddard, who spoke a little bit about that as well. Perhaps you could tell us, Ellie, a little bit about how things are likely to change with the SQE coming in this year, particularly at your firm.
Yes, so our March 2023 intake is going to be the last intake doing the LPC route. So our first intake going through the SQE will be our September 2023 intake. So that means they won't be doing the LPC. They will be doing a new course that we have designed along with the other city consortium firms and BPP, called the City Consortium Solicitor Training Program, otherwise known as the CCP for ease. This course is going to be around 11 months long, and there's going to be an SQE1 prep course, and then our future trainees will take SQE1. We'll have a plus program, which is essentially going to be equivalent of LPC electives, and then we will have an SQE2 prep program, and then our future trainees will sit SQE2 before starting their training contract. So it is longer than the LPC, and there'll be differences in terms of like content and also assessments. But we're really excited. It's something that we've been working on for a very, very long time. And the other thing that will change is our training contract. So it'll move from the traditional training contract to qualifying work experience. And we're really excited about this because it's presenting us with a unique opportunity to really make our own program, because previously the training contract was more regulated by the SRA, whereas now we get the freedom to implement a new kind of innovative
Oh, Ellie, you've gone on mute. Okay, maybe I think there's a little bit of a delay on the line.
So yeah, a very exciting and busy time for us.
Thank you very much. And I will apologise if anybody is getting, I don't know whether it's just me and finally the home internet connection's had enough, but we are getting a little bit of delay and distortion. So
yes.
Apologies for that. I think we're going to get a lot of questions about the SQE, so we'll come back to that at the end. But I think we should talk a little bit, because it's coming up to application season, about what do each of the firms who've joined us today look for in a good VAC scheme or training contract candidate? What sort of subjects might they have studied? What sort of experience and skills do they have? I'll keep going in the clockwise section, and then maybe we'll reverse for the next question to keep things interesting. So Thomas, if perhaps you could tell us about what a good VAC scheme or training contract candidate looks like.
Yeah, definitely. For the main thing that we look for in our applicants for vacation schemes is we just want students who are passionate and interested in a career in commercial law with Clyde & Co. We look for candidates to demonstrate that on their application form. So in terms of like what that looks like on an application form, we're looking for students who have done work experience or have committed to learning the skills that they think are necessary to pursue a career in law. So things such as commercial analysis skills, work experience in kind of a business environment, or any kind of client care skills as well. So communication, customer experience, that type of thing. That's definitely something that we would consider in terms of like soft skills and things on an application form. In terms of academics and degree, that kind of thing, as far as the degree discipline goes or institute of study, it makes absolutely no difference to us. There's no requirement for students to have studied a law degree or a humanities degree or anything like that. What we want is students who are able to basically take what they've learned from their time at university and apply it in a role as a vacation scheme student or as in a training contract. And that doesn't mean kind of technical skills either, like actual academic information. It's more, again, the personal development they've been on from studying at university.
Thank you. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about this later on, about the kind of personal development, the idea that you need to get these experiences, and everybody immediately thinks, well, I must have had to have done a lot of law experience in order to develop communication skills, where actually you probably don't need to have been kind of embedded as a paralegal for a couple of years to achieve that. But I think we'll come back to that a little bit later. So the order on my screen has actually switched. So I'm going to say, Johanna, could you tell us about what you feel a good VAC scheme or training contract candidate looks like? You're on mute. Sorry.
I would completely agree with what Thomas had to say at Clyde & Co. So I think someone who can genuinely demonstrate that commitment and interest to law and commitment to WILE as well. I think people shouldn't underestimate the work experience that they've had that's perhaps outside of the legal industry. I think skills that you would have picked up in part-time jobs. I appreciate people may not have had the same opportunities as this year, but if you've done stuff during your kind of A-levels or the first year of your degree, then putting down any non-legal work experience will be just as relevant. Try and think about what skills you have gained in that non-legal work experience and think about how you can make that relevant to the role of a trainee solicitor. Like, I'm sure in jobs that you've done, you've had to work under pressure, which is definitely a key skill of a trainee solicitor. So I would definitely think about that. And I know that there's lots of virtual work experience programs out there at the moment. So that's a really great way for you to kind of demonstrate your interest and commitment to law by adding some of those into your work experience or extracurricular activities section on the form as well.
Thank you very much. And I will apologise to everybody again that we are having some minor connection issues. Anybody who was trying to use the internet, I think it was Tuesday when they had the global outage, will know exactly how much fun that can be. So Mark, how about, do you want to talk a little bit about a good candidate for a training contract?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd echo a lot of what Thomas and Johanna said, particularly around the work experience bit. I think some students can worry if they've not had work experience in a law firm, but we recognise that that's not always the easiest thing to get. And actually, these skills that you pick up in part-time jobs, whether it's in a restaurant or a bar or a shop or wherever it is, are often probably far more useful than skills you would get up you would pick up shadowing a solicitor or whatever you were doing in a law firm. And the point that Johanna made about the virtual internships as well, that's a really good suggestion, and it also gives you an insight into the role of a junior lawyer. Because it's one thing studying law, but it's another thing practicing law. So one of the aims really of our program, and I imagine everyone else's program, is to give students a real taste of that. From an academic point of view, I guess it's a big consideration for us as a firm. That said, we're not looking for spectacular results in every single module. You know, the odd blip is not terminal as long as you're able to explain that during an interview. We generally look for an upwards trajectory, if that makes sense. So consistent improvement, whether it's from school or then into university. And we, along with, I guess everyone on this call uses rare recruitment. So we'll contextualize, everyone's nodding, so that's good. So we contextualize your grades and your achievements. So yeah, we think that's a very important part of our recruitment process.
Thank you, Mark. And the key message that's really coming through here is don't discount your non-law experience and things like that as well. But thank you for mentioning rare recruitment. I think it's kind of takes away some of the stigma that you need to have gone to a certain name of school where your results are actually contextualized based on what you achieved where you are. I think is that am I right in saying that?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, thanks. Okay, sorry, Amy, do you want to round us off with what your good training contract candidates look like?
Yeah, sure. I completely echo everyone else's points, so I won't go over those. I guess for us as well, it's, we know that candidates aren't just applying to us as a firm, but when we're reading the application, speaking to candidates, that's what I want to feel like. I want to feel like they are just applying to us and they've done their research. They know us as a firm. They know what we offer, who are our clients, the work we do. And it's not just a copy and paste from the website or from our brochure. It's really kind of going to events and having an understanding of who we are as a firm and therefore why they're applying to us. And I think when people have done that and have put in that work, it comes through on the applications, and it's just a genuine interest that you can just read, and it's so easy to spot. And I just think it's such a shame when people have spent time doing an application, but they just haven't put the amount of work in they needed to beforehand, because then it just gets rejected. So my kind of big piece of advice would be do your research and find out why it's a firm you want to work for. What are you going to get from your training contract and why that's important to you.
Thank you so much. And that's something that we mentioned time and time again on Target Jobs. Is tailor it to the, if you could send the same application to two completely different firms, then you have not done enough work on your application. You need to have actually done some research. You actually need to have tailored it to the firm that you're applying to. So thank you for mentioning that. I'm just very conscious of time because we do have a lot of questions coming in. So I'm going to change the format a little bit from what we usually do, and I'm going to just open these questions up to our panel. So please just feel free to chip in at any time, and then we can move on to the questions in the question feed a little bit quicker. So a little bit about the next kind of talking point we have is about the application process, which particularly I think we focus on training contracts. Is what does the application process look like for a training contract? So please, whoever would like to answer, and we'll all try to feed in a little bit to this as it goes on. Who wants to start?
I don't mind going first. So I guess most firms will have a slightly different recruitment process, but I guess there's some probably common themes throughout them, in the sense that at Weil we asked you to submit an online application form where we asked you to answer 3 questions. Again, it's just really kind of getting an understanding of why you want to be a commercial lawyer, why you're interested in Weil, and there's a commercial topic question in there as well, which you can discuss any commercial issue that has caught your attention recently. We have the online Watson Glaser critical reasoning test, then a pre-recorded video interview, and then a face-to-face interview with a written exercise. So that's our process to secure a vacation scheme at the firm. So I'm sure a lot of the firms of the call today will also do very similar processes, but maybe just slightly different.
I can see lots of nods there. Does anybody have a sort of deviation from that they'd like to share?
Yeah, I'm happy to share some info on Cloud & Co. So our application process is slightly different to Real. So we actually only have an application. We don't do any kind of critical thinking or a situational judgment test. So it's quite straightforward. It's an application and then straight through to interview for an assessment centre for a vacation scheme. Very similar application process. You know, we ask students to kind of explain their motivations and why they're applying for the firm. You know, showing the research and showing their commercial thinking as well on the application form, but the way in which our assessment centre might vary from other firms as well. So Cloud & Co recruit exclusively off the back of our vacation schemes. So students will take part in a written exercise. So they'll be given kind of a topic to write a short kind of report or paper on, and then they'll have a follow-up discussion with an associate who will then assess their kind of discussion skills and their kind of how they respond to additional thinking, that type of thing. And then they'll go through to have a group exercise with the other students on their assessment centre or the graduates on their assessment centre, and then follow on with an interview, which is competency-based from HR or a fee earner. So that's how our process varies slightly. And then throughout the vacation scheme, continually kind of assessed on their performance and how they've engaged and how they've performed with their departments. And then at the end of that, they'll have a secondary interview where they'll talk about their experiences on the vacation scheme. Mostly we try to encourage students to move away from what they've discussed in their initial interviews, because it's more about how have they developed themselves both personally and professionally throughout their vacation scheme placement with us, and how they feel they would be a good fit for Cloud & Co, and how this insight into our culture and our firm has put them in good stead to become a trainee with us.
Thank you, because I think that I mean, that's obviously something you want to have in anybody who's going to join your firm. You want to know that they're going to learn from the experiences that they have and that they're going to develop on. When you say written exercises, because you mentioned training contracts, are you talking more sort of your legal writing exercises, sort of drafting, or is it more of a kind of general day-to-day sort of how would you communicate with a client sort of thing?
Yeah, so it has a scenario that it's based around the legal scenario, but it's not legal based, if that makes sense. So it's not really technical. We're not assessing people's technical ability or knowledge of the law in general. It's more just a scenario they might find themselves in terms of a brief from a client. You know, they might be given a situation, say, go, you know, from a supervisor, please go and research this and write a report, present your findings to us. And then as part of the assessment process at the end of the vacation scheme, they do also undertake a case study with us as well, which again is fairly similar, but it's a bit more kind of technical in terms of commercial analysis as opposed to just business writing.
I think people, thank you. I think people would find that useful to know what sort of thing they might have to go through to get through a vacation scheme. Just to open this up a little bit, we'll do one more and then we will move on, because I keep hearing the little pop as the questions appear in the feed. So is there anything that's really stood out to you? Have you ever, I know we've talked a lot about, you know, you need to be very specific to the firm, you need to show an interest in the firm's culture, you need to have done your research, but are there other things that stand out on an application form to you when someone's applying to a training contract? You know, maybe for the right reasons, maybe for the wrong reasons, as in never do this, or maybe always try to do this. You know, would anybody care to sort of share some of their experiences?
I think for me, I mean, and I think it's probably the same for everyone on this call, you get thousands of applications. So sometimes it's the smallest things that can make the biggest difference. And whether that be putting the right firm name in, spelling the firm name correctly, you know, spelling, grammar, all of that, you know, we are quite harsh on those sort of things because we get so many applications that there has to be some sort of filter system. So for me, it's reading an application that is set out correctly. All of the boxes are filled in. There's no missing gaps of information. You know, just it makes our lives easier. All of the information is provided. You know, the firm name is correct. There's no spelling or grammar. And actually, then it reads through as a really good application. And I think if you can get the basics right, you're kind of on to succeed. And then it's just down to you and the content that you're putting in your application. So I think that would be my kind of tip. I know it's a bit of a basic one, but sometimes it's the basic ones that are kind of the most important.
And especially in this era of virtual, like, I mean, this is something we've said when we're talking about virtual fairs as well, or even if, you know, a law firm's maybe a virtual law fair. fill in your profile, like have all those boxes filled in, because people need that information about you. If you're looking at an application form and thinking, I'm sure that's optional, you're not giving the recruiter enough to work with about you to kind of say, well, yeah, okay, we're interested. We need to bring this person in for an assessment or an interview. So thank you. I thought that was a really useful point. Is there anything else that to anybody that stands out, really stands out, either for good or bad reasons?
Yeah, I think the term "stand out" is quite interesting. Often hear candidates or students ask, "How do I stand out?" But people often stand out for the wrong reasons. So the CV's on a bright coloured paper, or there's a picture of them on the CV, or there's lots of boxes on the CV, and it's done quite kind of arty. But I can't speak for everyone on the call. I don't know the way that the firms like it, but we like ours set out a pretty straightforward way. So start with your academics. If possible, put down the module results that you've received next to the university section, and then split your work experience into non-legal and legal experience. And as you said before, all non-legal experience is definitely worth putting on there. Have a section as well, perhaps for any virtual internships that you've done, and a section too about any positions of responsibilities. And that's kind of it, I think. Please shout out if there's anything else that you think I should mention in terms of what you should put on a CV. But we want to, because we're reviewing so many of them, we want them to be as straightforward to read as possible, and that's what stands out for me.
Thank you, and I think that's something we've covered in some of our CV workshops, is don't overcomplicate it. And particularly for me and some of my colleagues, we're all either from a journalism or media background, and there is always that need to, we're going to get a graphic designer to do this and do that, and paint swooshes and Comic Sans, and it's a mess. You can't read it. It's always doing the simple Word document. This is where I've been. This is what I've done. It can actually be more effective. It's easier for people to digest. So thank you. I think it's a really key point. Does anyone have anything else they want to add, or should we move on to the question feed that's coming in from the people who are attending?
I just had one more thing to add off the back of that. I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that I always give to students is not necessarily what you talk about, it's the way in which you talk about it. One of the things that we really pride ourselves on and what we look for in our applicants is we want people who have unique stories to tell, and people who don't just talk about the same experiences in the same way in every application. What we want to know is what makes this application unique, and why would you specifically be a good trainee for us. You might as an applicant think it's an insignificant experience you've undertaken, from working in a, if you've worked in retail, or if you've had a Saturday job, or worked in a bar or something, but it's how you talk about that experience, the skills that you've developed, difficult situations you found yourself in, and how they've helped you develop over whatever period of time it is. They're definitely things that really stand out.
Thank you. Yeah, it's obviously that, and we said this when we talked about the STAR method before. Is we always talk about this situation, task, action, result way of presenting your experience, and sometimes there is a misconception that could be over, it's over 5 years or something like that, when really what you want is an individual instance of something, and then if you want to show the development, you show another individual instance that is further down the line. For those of you if anybody wants to go back to our employability webinars, I'm sure you can look at our CV section and presenting your experience and employer skills, that sort of thing as well.
The only other thing that I would potentially add is also try not to compare yourself against other people, because I think sometimes that can make you feel like maybe your application isn't good enough, but everyone has something unique to bring to the table, and try and think what your unique point is. But please don't compare yourself to somebody else who's maybe had lots of legal work experience, because that's great for them, but you'll probably have something else that you'll be able to bring to the table. So try not to compare or stress yourself out by analysing what somebody else is doing. Concentrate on yourself.
Thanks. I think that goes double during the pandemic, where social media envy has kind of skyrocketed. Everybody seems to be baking and doing yoga and learning to code and everything else. And you think they must have amazing CVs, but focus on yourself, focus on what you've done. I think it's really, really useful advice. Thank you. I will turn now to the question feed because I'm just, as I say, I'm always conscious of time with these. And the top one is one that comes up very often during our webinars, particularly to do with law, and is how important are A-level grades when applying to a law firm? So anybody who would like to answer, or we can take a general poll as to how important they are, if that's easier.
I think this one is, I guess, quite topical at the moment, especially given everything that happened last year with obviously the A-level algorithm. So I think probably the same as most firms on this call, we are very accommodating to that at the moment, and we'll take that completely into account when looking at students' application form. While we look at your application as a whole, so whilst obviously grades do play into that, if someone has got a really good application form, well, then we'll look at everything in context. As Mark said, we also have the RES contextualized recruitment system, so we can see how students have performed against their peers as well. So it's very much a holistic approach rather than ruling someone out just because they don't meet the typical AAB requirement. So yeah, I think there's a lot of flexibility over that this year.
Thank you. And I think, was it Mark, were you saying as well, you look to see a general progression as well? So if your A-levels maybe have been in the middle of a pandemic and have been subject to all sorts of things, showing how well you've gone on to progress at degree level might make a difference as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't
some
have minimum requirements for A-levels. So it's, yeah, really down to your university grades and how you manage to kind of show that that upwards trajectory.
Would anyone on the panel here be looking at mitigating circumstances, perhaps for A-levels that have happened over the last couple of years? Yeah, we can see a lot of agreement going on there. So,
and I would say on mitigating circumstances, if you want to kind of speak to a member of the graduate recruitment team before you submit your application, if you're worried or you've got any concerns, then it's always worth doing that if you want to talk things through beforehand.
And also, I just kind of reassure students that it's not a bad thing to have mitigating or extenuating circumstances. Like, things happen in life and that's absolutely fine. And I think we just want you to tell us about it, because then we can do something about it and look at your application in context. So, you know, I get lots of students that are really worried about, I don't want to put that in my form, but it really doesn't matter and it's not going to affect you negatively at all. So be reassured that if anything happened, just let us know.
Yeah, and I think as well to kind of follow on from Johanna and Amy there as well, is that mitigating circumstances, they're not the kind of one size fits all. You know, one person's circumstances may impact them completely differently to someone who's been through a similar situation. So again, don't feel like just because it's you feel it's insignificant or it's not a valid excuse, it doesn't mean that we won't look at it and try and support you wherever we can, or take that into account in your application form. You know, these things happen to people, and people respond differently in second situations. So
thank you. That's really, really useful advice there. And I hope that encourages anybody who is worried about that sort of thing to contact the recruitment team at the firm that you're applying to. I just want to cross this one very, very quickly off the list, because this seems to come up an awful lot in different webinars. How much weight do firms put on your university's reputation? I think it might be easier to say, do any of the firms here have preferred universities that they're looking for when they're hiring candidates? Got no's. There we go. So we've crossed that one off the list. I hope that helps. I'm not going to read out anybody's names on the questions, because in case footage of this ends up on YouTube or anything like that. So the next question we have is, how significant is experience in one's application for a training contract or VAC scheme? How disadvantageous would it be if you did not have any legal experience at all? It's quite an interesting one.
I can talk about this one, if my connection will allow me to. So we say that you don't need previous experience to apply for any of our work experience schemes or our training contracts. What we look for is a demonstrable interest in law. So that could be being part of your law society at university. It could be just attending events like these, going to law fairs, bits and bobs like that. You can definitely include on your CV. And although it's not counted as work experience, it's still something to show that you have been proactive about learning about a career in law, and firms, and what you think you want to do. So
thank you. I wonder if that extends even to, I mean, what we say to some of the barristers, or aspiring barristers, I should say, is if you are interested in law, and maybe you obviously need to have a certain degree of work experience in order to get into the sort of standard period of professional training. But you can go to, I mean, do people realise that like the Old Bailey has a public gallery? If you're interested particularly in criminal law and things like that, you can go along. I think so. I'm not sure if some of the commercial courts are fairly open about that sort of thing as well. There are ways you can be proactively do without spending a lot of money or having to having to have had a huge sort of amount of applications and placements and things like that. So thank you for suggesting that, Ellie. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add?
No, I guess it's just where your virtual work experience programs come in again. They're a really good way to kind of build up your application form and put them in your work experience section. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to build up your experience as well.
That's particularly with sort of virtual open days that have happened in the past as well, I think.
Yeah, and the Forage platform, which I know quite a few firms on here who also have their virtual work experience launched on there, they're the ones that I was talking about. And just even listing the events that you've attended. These events that you attend take up a huge amount of time. So it's always a really positive thing to see that students have spent a number of hours attending events.
Thank you. We've got a question about when we should be applying for training contracts, and I think always check the firm that you're applying to make sure that you've got the right deadline. But there are a lot of deadlines that fall around the end of July, but always check with the place that you want to apply to. We'll cross that one off quite quickly. At the moment, do law firms have a preference when it comes to hiring someone who has done the LPC or the new SQE route? Does anyone want to talk about this? As Ellie, you were going to say this is still too early days for this kind of question, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we just don't have a preference. We don't really care about what route you've done, what degree you've decided to do. We just care about, whether we think you're a good fit for us. So we'll cross the bridge when we come to it, essentially, in terms of what we have to then put people through in order to make sure that they're up to the standard of everyone else coming in to our intakes. So yeah,
I think it's going to be a bit of a hybrid approach for a little while as kind of the LPC phases out and the new SQE comes in. I think you'll find that you'll have people doing both, but I think both are equally fine. The LPC is very tried and tested, so we're happy for people to do that, but we're equally happy for people to go on and do the SQE, and we'll, like Eddie said, we'll see how it fits in when you join the firm, but we're definitely able to accommodate both.
So would it be fair to say then, rather look at the firm that you want to apply to, or look at the type of law that you want to eventually practice, rather than worry about the possible qualification routes? If they're all valid qualification routes, so it's looking at the firm rather than at the qualification at the moment that would be the sensible thing to do.
Yeah.
I see a lot of nods. Yeah, thanks. So there's a good, I think this is quite a good question here, because sometimes you can get some interesting responses. Where are the best places to do research on a firm's culture? And maybe, if our panel could just share a little bit about where they would direct people if they wanted to learn more.
I think probably one of the most useful places is the employees of the firm. Feel free to make personal connections with people on LinkedIn. I'm sure you'll find someone within the firms you're applying for that will be happy to speak to you. Filling that, or as kind of a starting point, if you look on at firms' websites or their graduate recruitment websites, that type of thing, they'll have a kind of a list of initiatives that they're involved in, and that gives you a sense of where their dedications lie or where their commitments are for kind of the future and what they want their strategy to look like in a few years' time. So they'll give you some key talking points or specifics. But I think, yeah, definitely the people you can speak to are either lawyers in the firm, they could be people who've done vacation schemes, or maybe even future trainees of those firms. They're definitely the best people to speak to, because who knows the culture of an organization better than the people who work there.
Thank you for that, Thomas. I like the way that you actually defined as well. It's usually easier to go for someone who is a trainee or an associate, so that not everybody just immediately reaches out to a managing partner on LinkedIn. And we have talked about this before on webinars as well. If you are going to reach out to someone who is fairly sort of a trainee or an associate, put an actual message. Don't just use that LinkedIn Connect thing that says, "Hello, I'm on LinkedIn. Please add me as a friend," or whatever it says. Just put a little bit of a message. I am a law student, or I am doing my GDL. I am interested in your firm. Could you spare 5 minutes to just tell me a little bit about your working life? Make sure that you actually send a message that people will react to and understand. Would anyone else like to add sort of where's the best place to go out and research a firm's sort of work and culture?
I just wanted to add a bit onto to Thomas's point, and I think it's a really good idea. I guess if you're a student, you might think, oh well, there's loads of trainees and associates at the firm. Which ones do I approach? I think a good approach would be attending the virtual law fairs and any presentations that firms are putting on, and see which of the trainees and associates who are presenting at those, because often they'll say at the end, if you have any further questions, then please get in touch. And I guess it's like a warm introduction then when you do reach out to them on LinkedIn.
I think also as well, just making the most of the virtual world at the moment, because there was a time where you had to travel 2 hours maybe to go to an event in London, or you had to get up and go to University Hall to go to the law fair. Whereas now you just click on a link and you're in front of people from different firms. So I think while the virtual world is still happening, and we're all at different events all the time, there's so many opportunities to just click on, even if it's for 10 minutes. You'll still get a sense of what firms like, I think, from the people that are talking and what they're talking about. So yeah, I think just make the most of all of these virtual events, because I think they're so helpful at the moment.
And being proactive at those events, I think, as well, is the other thing, is because you can just attending isn't, you can't just sit there and wait in a chat room for someone to go, oh, this person is obviously perfect, of course we need to talk to them. Like, you actually need to engage, to be out there, to talk to people, and to sort of put yourself forward, get your elevator pitch ready. This is who I am, this is why I'm interested, and try to sort of make more of a connection. Thank you very much for all that. Would anyone else like to chip in on that, or should we move on to one of the next questions? I think we can move on. So there's one here which is about sort of what stage, really, I think, is should you be applying for training contracts, and that's whether law firms consider first-year law students or would prefer to see second and third-year students. I'm assuming that's applying for a training contract. I know there has been kind of a shift in the last few years. Would anyone care to comment?
So at the moment, we still are requiring people to have completed their penultimate year of study to apply for a training contract. And for VAC schemes, you need to be in your penultimate year, so just starting your penultimate year in order to apply. And then we have first year open days for first year students. And we have a winter workshop for finalists and graduates who aren't necessarily sure that they want to commit to applying for a training contract just yet. So in short, we're not considering first year students for training contracts just yet. But, as you say, there has been a shift in recent years, so possibly in the future, I don't know.
First year open days though, so if you did want a taste of what life is like at the firm, you can apply for open days.
Just to follow on kind of on Cloud & Co's first year program, and then just a bit more information about vacation schemes. So we run a first year program that's 9 months long. So it includes 9 months of ongoing employability mentoring from fee earners within the organisation, and partnerships with our diversity partners as well as a week-long work experience with the firm. In terms of when people apply for training contracts, like I mentioned before, we recruit exclusively off the back of our VAC schemes, which are only open to those in penultimate year of study onwards. But that doesn't mean you have to apply in your penultimate year. We get questions all the time from people who are maybe in final year, or graduates maybe 1-2 years post-university, or even people who are career changers who feel they may be applying too late or they've missed their opportunity, and that definitely isn't the case. apply for training contracts when you think you're ready, when you think you've got the experience and you're 100% certain, or you're 80-90% there that this is the career for you and this is what you want to do. It might take a few years for you to get that. Absolutely fine. There's no pressure for you to do it in your penultimate year. So probably a bit of advice for penultimate year students as well: don't panic just because everyone in your class is applying. Don't feel like you need to as well.
Thank you. I think that really is, if you're out there and you are looking to apply, find out what level of experience you need to have before you start making those steps. It's never too early to start thinking about your career, though. I mean, you can be in the first year and start sort of asking yourself, what do I want to do? You may not apply for it for 5 years down the line, but at least you're starting to think about it. You're starting to be proactive. And being at university really is the prime time, because that time will go really quickly. I'm really sorry to anybody who's actually sort of enjoying their university time, but it does go really quickly. So thank you to everybody for kind of chipping in on that. So I'm just scrolling down the question feed. I think we've had, there's one here that's do the firms favour, I think it's academic kind of grades over legal work experience, or are both viewed equally? I know we've touched a little bit on this already today, but would anyone else like to sort of comment?
Yeah, sure, I don't mind going. I think, your grades at university are important, and, I would say you definitely want to focus on achieving the grades that you want. And if you do have legal work experience, then that's great. But like we said earlier, the legal work experience part is definitely not essential. So I think, you can always pick up legal work experience at another point. You're not going to be able to go back and do your exam. So I would definitely always make sure you prioritize your studies, as you don't get another chance or shot at that. But yeah, so I know it's a bit of a juggling act, but I would say definitely make sure you focus on your studies, and if you do have capacity and you feel like you can do the work experience as well, then that's great. But yeah, grades are definitely important.
Thank you very much, Johanna, for answering. I think, yeah, that makes perfect sense. This interesting question, what's the likelihood of securing a training contract after working as a paralegal? I mean, we've just talked about legal work experience. I mean, is it easier for those who've been working as a paralegal to get onto a training contract? It's a bit of an awkward question, but what do we think? Is it essential to be a paralegal? Is maybe the question.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's essential to be a paralegal. Again, that's just some more experience that you can add to your CV and increase your skill set. I think, again, it's not, like I said, it's not an absolute requirement to be a paralegal. It might benefit you. It might help you decide whether a career is for you. If you do paralegal, maybe in the firm that you're thinking of applying for a training contract, then it's an opportunity for you to get a bit more of an insight into the work that firm does. But it's definitely not a necessity. It's more down to kind of personal preference, whether you feel it's for you or not.
Thank you. I'm just forgive me for just scrolling down the question feed. There is a question which is more to do with postgraduate. How favourable are candidates who have completed a combined LPC LLM over just the LPC? Is there? I can see lots of shaking heads.
I think you have to do the LPC to be able to go on to complete a training contract at the moment. Obviously, the LLM is just a bit of a added bonus if you want to do it, and if you want to kind of make it up to a master's. But I don't think any firm will require you to do that. It's just a bit of a top up if you want to turn it into a master's.
I think Linklaters actually do that.
They do require it. Sorry, I was speaking on behalf.
No, I think they do. But yeah, again, like I think the general consensus around from most firms is that like if you want to do it, you can do it, but we don't really mind if you don't.
Yeah, I think just to add to that from experience working in previous firms is that I'd always check the firm's websites for their requirements, because what you might find is firms that offer an accelerated legal practice course may also have additional LLM modules on top. So you don't actually need to have done them. They'll happily support you through it when you're doing your accelerated LPC or in the build-up to you starting your training contract. But yeah, like Ellie and Joanna said, it does just kind of come down to preference. It's up to you.
Thank you very much. I think we have gone through quite a huge number of questions by the standards of one of our webinars. I just want to say a big thank you to the entire panel for taking part today, because we are almost out of time. If we just want to do a quick whip round, if anybody wants to redirect to a website or a place to find more information, if I start with you, Amy, because you're in the top left of my screen, please do drop it over there and let everybody know where they can find out more. You're on mute, Amy, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, just our graduate recruitment website, where you'll be able to find out all of the information you want to know, kind of the events that we're attending. I think that's your safest bet to go to first.
Yeah, and I would probably say that's the same for WILE. Check out our graduate website. We'll, I guess, be back out on campus in September, October, November, the same as most other firms. So yeah, hopefully look forward to seeing you then.
And Thomas?
Yeah, I'd say first instance, maybe follow us on Instagram. We post regular updates on firm news and things that are happening that might be of interest to you. It's Clydeco Early Careers on Instagram, or alternatively have a look on our Early Careers website, which is clydecograduates.com.
Thank you very much. And Ellie and Mark?
Yeah, just our graduate recruitment page. We have a mailing list as well. So we have a Meet Us page on our graduate recruitment website, where there's a link to our mailing list, and we will send contact to people as and when we get bits and bobs in that we can share. So I would definitely encourage people to sign up for that if they want. And our FAQs as well, always look at the FAQs.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And one more big thank you, please. If you found this webinar useful, or if you've enjoyed this webinar, do pop it into the chat so people can see, because obviously it's very difficult when we're talking about a lot of things, but we can't see you. So please do pop that in the chat or in the question feed, so to say thank you to our panel. Our next Target Jobs webinar will be on the 24th of June, where I think we're talking about the dreaded subject of putting 2021 on your CV. Thank you once again to everybody for joining me, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.